welcome. In today's video we're going to be checking a car that I've been looking forward to having a go in for quite some time, and it's the brand new Audi RS3. Now, when this car first launched, 2.5 litre 5-cylinder turbocharged engine, 4-wheel drive, everybody likes an RS3 and I like the RS3. I really like the last one. Yeah, it's a little bit blunt to drive, and yeah, it's not the most driver focused machine, but nonetheless Audi have done some significant changes on the new model. It's got a clever 4-wheel drive system, it's got a front wider track, and they say that they've eliminated the understeer. Now, I've had this car for the last couple of days, and in today's video what we're going to do is we're going to do more of a day in the life of me, and basically just going from place to place, driving it how normal RS3 drivers drive it. Because yeah, it's all great taking it on the track, etc., and doing lots of oversteer, but realistically that no one's going to do that. No one's going to do that with the RS3. So have they made this car better? And more importantly, it's very expensive. This one is near on £70,000, 70 grand for one of these. However, don't knock until you try. That's what I always say. So let's spend some time with it. But first things first, I need to get this car clean. So obviously when I usually shoot these videos, I get the cars cleaned, obviously, for camera, and I'm running a little bit late and this car's absolutely grubby and the weather's not been particularly awesome. It's trying to rain already, so I'm down at gleamngo. We're going to see them, wash the car, go check them out in the links down below. So here's the RS3 at gleamngo. Go check them out, especially if you're local in East London. They detail virtually everything. This car is a little bit grubby. It might not be showing on camera, but it is a little bit grubby nonetheless. Love the spec of this car. I know a lot of you guys like the black wheels or the black everything, but I love these silver inserts, silver wing mirrors. That's my go-to spec. This in a dark blue or dark green would look absolutely nice. And if you ask me, I'd probably go for the Saloon version over the hatch. Just looks a little bit more premium, especially at this sort of price tag. Anyway, I'm going to let these guys do their magic, get it washed, and we'll go on the road, go on some B roads and see what this RS3 is all about. So let's go. Okay, so the RS3 is all clean. Lovely, it looks better once it's clean. You can hear that 5-cylinder warbling away. Shout out to gleamngo for sorting this out. Go check them out. I'll put all the socials and the links in the description down below. They're on Instagram, they're everywhere. Definitely a go-to place if you need your car clean, especially in East London. Anyway, can you believe it? It's bloody raining outside. Got the car clean and it's raining. Unbelievable. It's one of those ones. Anyway, let's go out some roads and see what this is like. Can you believe it? Get a car bloody cleaned and all of a sudden it starts to chuck it down with rain. But anyway, shout out to gleamngo for sorting that out on this car. And by the way, we've got some quattro weather to exploit some of the car's talents, and it's got a lot of talents, this. In fact, let's talk about some of the technical highlights of this RS3. Let's start out with the front. It's got a purposeful front stance. That's because it sits 33mm wider on the front track than it does on the rear. It's got 265 section tyres as opposed to 245s on the rear, and that's to combat understeer, which has been the Achilles heel on all previous RS3s. They've always been a bit front nose heavy. It's just typical Audi. It just wants to understeer, not always engage. It's a bit of a one-trick pony. I still like the RS3s, but you always wish that, oh, it's got this amazing 5-cylinder engine. Can it just have the chassis to go with it? And I feel like Audi, from the technical highlights, have actually cared and thought a little bit with this car. It's got negative camber at the front end, and it's also got this clever torque split Audi RS 4-wheel drive system. But one thing I must say about this car, it does look purposeful. You can see the money in it. If you saw this in your rear view mirror, you better move. You really better move. Let me know what you think in the comments as opposed to the styling tweaks. I can see the money in this car, but with some options, this car will go to £70,000, or does it? Because I went on the configurator the other night, and you can get this up to about £63,000, depending on what options you go for. I don't need electric seats. I don't need the radar cruise control. Some of you guys might want the radar cruise control. I don't need it. You still get all the fancy, clever four-wheel drive bits as standard on the RS3. Let's go out, let's go for a drive. Let's see what this is like on some switchback roads. This is RS3 territory, bear in mind. And then what we'll do is we'll drive back into the city and see how it opposed to motorway driving, B-road driving. We're sort of doing everything all in one in this video. Anyway, I've done enough talking now. Let's hop in the car. Also, make sure you hit the like button, hit the subscribe button for more content like this, because it does make a massive difference. Anyway, let's get on with it. When you hop in the RS3, you know that it's an Audi, isn't it? It's got a lovely interior. Probably not as fancy and as crazy as an A45 with all of its Star Trek screens, but still a lovely place to be in. And it's much better made than the Merc. I don't know why, but Merc interiors are just not well put together at all. This is lovely. Everything you touch is nice. The flat bottom steering wheel, which is an optional extra. You can go for a round wheel. We can talk about that later on, as opposed to why you want a flat bottom steering wheel. I suppose I can talk about it now. I think the main reason is because it's a bit awkward when you hold it at the bottom here, but it does look nicer than the round one. But you hop into it and it's a nice place to sit in. You've got the new MMI system, which is now touchscreen, and it works really well. It's got wireless Apple CarPlay. You've got the virtual cockpit. The only thing I don't like is they've changed the rev gauge. In the old RS3, it had this lovely round rev gauge, which told you obviously where the red line is. It was just analog and cool. This one's got this, I don't know, this fighter jet thing that goes back and forth. It's the other way around. It's a little bit more confusing than the previous one. Sometimes if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Don't know why they needed to change it. I felt like they just wanted to for this version of the RS3, but it's a lovely place to sit. The only problem I do have is these paddles, even though they're aluminium finished, they do sound and feel a little bit cheap and sterile. And this gear selector thing is a bit naff. But other than that, it's pretty cool. Anyway, when you start the car, it defaults into auto mode. Now, there are several driving modes in the RS3, and you can configure them to each and every different one. The one I like to go in is always comfort. With comfort, you get a completely different car on the road. For starters, these new adaptive dampers bespoke to the RS3. It might come into later VW Group products and later Audi versions. It's on standard steel springs, no air suspension, nothing crazy like that. This is a hyper hatch after all. It's so refined. It is business executive saloon refined. It's a mile muncher. It's something that the old RS3 could never do. It goes over bumps really well. It goes over potholes really well. There's just a nice, taut yet supple purchase it has on the road. It's night and day. Easily one of the best riding hyper hatches out there, which isn't saying much because the A45's ride is, I'll be honest with you, shocking. You'd have to see a chiropractor after a 3-hour drive. It's so bad. I'm a young guy and I get out of the A45S thinking, what the hell was that all about? So to jump into something that rides well, and bear in mind, Audi RSs, none of them ride well. Okay, the new RS6 rides all right, the e-tron GT rides well, and then there's this. And the previous RS3 did have a ride issue. It just wasn't comfy over bumps. This is a major improvement. And the best bit of all is the fact that these come standard on all RS3s. You don't have to spec it in, which is good. Really, really good. But it is a bit of a confusing car. If you leave it in the auto mode, it's not really the mode I would go for personally, mainly because it just feels like the car's trying to do one thing when you're doing the other. And once you, let's just say you're driving it a bit normal and then you give it a bit of poke, then the box is sort of trying to figure out what you're doing, and then you drive normal, and then it's always two steps behind of what you're doing. So put it in comfort and it's great. You can put it in efficiency mode, but I'll be honest with you, don't bother with that, because the most you'll ever get on a run is, if you're lucky, early 30 mpg, but then even then you're driving it like Miss Daisy. Expect 24 to 23 miles to the gallon. It's juicy, but it's worth it because this engine is just an absolute honey, absolute honey. So on the road and normal town driving and normal road driving, it's all right, it's pretty good. Then you go into the RS mode. Now you can configure it for optimal performance, so you can go into RS performance, which just turns everything up to 11. Even when the suspension is in its hardest mode, it's still not crashy, it's still very taut, it's still got some give in the suspension. You can feel the car pottering around, and you get some communication of what the front axle is going up to, or getting up to, shall I say. And it needs that, because I'll be honest with you, the steering, even though it's quick and it's responsive, there is no feel at all through it. The weighting's all right, but it doesn't really give you a sense of communication of what's going on. It's better than previous RS3s, but then again, that's not saying much at all. Then you've got the gearbox, 7-speed dual clutch. I don't know why, but for some reason it doesn't feel as razor sharp on the paddles as opposed to the previous RS3. I don't know if that's to do with WLTP and emissions, etc., because this car does now run an OPF filter, which does kill the soundtrack. But let me give it some and tell you what this engine's all about. For starters, it's got flexible torque low down in a rev range. It's such a flexible, punchy, torquey unit, and in my opinion, it just adds to the driving experience. It's got like a diesel-like low down shove, which I like on the road. It just means that overtaking is done seamlessly, and the performance. I mean, if I just use the kick down now, man, that is properly fast. I mean, that's the one thing I will say. It's deceptively quick, because now it's so refined and so almost limousine-like. You just feel like you're covering so much ground without you actually noticing it. It's much easier to drive and more confidence-inspiring than the previous model. And I can see where the money is in this car. For normal day-to-day driving, it feels expensive. More importantly, it feels special. That's because it's got this lovely 5-cylinder. But we need to talk about the torque vectoring split 4-wheel drive, which uses 2 clutches on either side. So in any running gear, it's always sending power to 4 given wheels. Unlike the previous car where it was just front driven, and then it will send you a bit of something at the rear, but you never noticed it. You could never get the car throttle adjustable coming out of a corner. It just felt like a front wheel drive car with infinite traction. This one is a little bit different. What I'm going to do is just put it into RS individual. The main reason I put it in there is because I quite like the powertrain to be in the most aggressive setup, but I like the steering in comfort, just because I like the weighting. Audi still haven't got the weighting right in this car. It's better than before, but still not quite right, but it's an improvement. And then what you get then is a car that you can just terrorize a B road down with so much damping and so much control, which gives you loads of confidence. Now, when you go into the RS mode, it backs off the traction control only to its halfway house in sport mode. Can you feel the 4-wheel drive system? Yes, you can. It's a bit of a confusing setup, because what it's doing is it's giving you a bit of assistance coming out of a corner. So if you come out of this hairpin here, I can feel the outside wheel just giving me that rotation, that bit of slip, just assisting it coming around the corner. I quite like that. It's not natural. It feels like a bit of a science project going on, but that's what makes it cool. If you work around the parameters of how the system works, it just aids you going into a corner. Are you going to get massive power slides coming out of it? No. What you'll get is a nice bit of rotation. I think how Audi have set the car up is for inexperienced drivers that haven't sensed oversteer before, and then obviously they'll feel the back end come out and they're like, woo, yeah. It gives you that bit of rotation coming out of the corner, something that the old RS3 never did. I think to compensate, what Audi have done is pipe some noise into the cabin. It's not a fake noise, because the way I look at it, if it was a fake noise, it would make a different sound on the inside as opposed to the outside. So you still get that lovely 5-cylinder coming in, which is which is lovely. It's just a nice motor. It sounds worse than the previous model, but that's just the way it is. All cars sound worse. Newer than the previous generation. Most owners will put a you know, a res delete or a back box on it to get the ultimate 5-cylinder experience. So, turning into a corner in an RS3, well, there is confidence in the front end. That 30mm wider track with the negative camber gives it a much better, more positive turning. I've got confidence in the front end. Mid-corner, I've got it. It's just biting into that corner. Those front tyres are working pretty hard because I've got a temperature gauge showing me what's going on over the front axles, and what you get is basically the front end turning in, and in mid-corner you've got the four-wheel drive working. And if you work within the parameters of how the system works, good, really good. What this car does is it gives you a sense of confidence, more so than the older RS3. It just means that you can cover ground much more quickly, meaning that it's actually faster in the real world than the previous RS3. You're going to say, well, how does that work? It's got no more power than the last one. Well, when you've got softer damping, it means that you've got more contact patch on the road. More contact patch on the road means more grip. More grip means more power. You're more confident in applying power, which means that you can cover ground much more quickly. In fact, probably a bit too quick at times, because it is a properly fast car. I mean, 0 to 60 happens in 3 and a bit seconds. Top speed's 155 mile an hour limited. You can pay a few grand and Audi can raise the limiter to 180. Do you need that? No. I mean, you've got to keep your eye on the speedo, because this car is a license loser. Even in the RS mode now, as I'm coming into a village and just calming things down, it's so relaxing. You can do long distances with ease, no problems at all. Something that the A45 can't do, something that most four-wheel drive cars cannot do, and I like that. I do like that in this car. So I'm seeing where the money is in this car. Audi have actually spent money on the chassis. They've decided, you know what, we're going to make this car drive well, and it does drive really well. It's not perfect, it's a bit of a Frankenstein, but once you spend time with it and get to understand it a little bit more, trust me, it's a proper bit of kit. You can't drive this car ham-fisted. You can grab it by the scruff of the neck and you can make it do some really cool things. I suspect on a track, this thing would be a bit of an animal. The brakes, it's powerful. It's got 6-piston calipers. It's got big discs, and they are powerful, very, very powerful. But there's a bit of a dead spot in the pedal. So you're delving deeper, there's nothing, and then you delve in a little bit more, and you've got some bite. Takes a little bit of getting used to, but once you get used to it, it's not a problem at all. As you can tell by the weather, it's greasy out there. You know, summer weather, it always is. It always picks up the greases in the roads, which makes it a little bit more slipperier than as opposed to being winter, for example. And I can't see many cars keeping up with this. I don't know what other modern car would keep up with it. Yeah, the new M3 with the X-Drive, of course. I think to get away from this, you need to be in something like a 992 Turbo S, which is possibly the most ballistic missile you could buy on sale today. And this, flying down the road, it's nice. You can terrorise it, but what's nice is the fact that you can actually feel the four-wheel drive system working. You can feel the outside or inside wheel, depending on where you turn, doing its job. And with the supple ride, it just makes this an absolute honey. That paired with the 5-cylinder, yeah, it's a proper bit of kit. And you get a bit of rotation coming into a corner. Not too much, nothing too illegal, just a nice bit of rotation. I mean, coming in here, mid-corner, getting on the throttle, and you can just feel the system just working its magic. Something, see, you can just feel it rotating, just pivoting around you. It's a lovely, sensational feeling. And I like that, I really do like that. And then with the ESC in sport mode, it doesn't cut in too much. It gives you the right amount of slip without you basically having an accident. I almost forgot, we need to do launch control in this. So, let's come to a stop. It's very easy in this car. Left foot on the brake, right foot on the gas. and it's not working. There's been a bit of a problem. Sometimes the launch control works, sometimes it doesn't work. Let's see if we can do that again. Left foot on the brake, right foot on the gas. Okay, it's not doing it. I'm just going to give it a hard launch acceleration. Look. So clean. So clean. You can sense that obviously this car has a mechanical limited slip diff at the front as well too. In certain areas you do feel it tuck in as well, the front nose. So you've got all these clever bits of tech to help the chassis work. And the more time you spend with it, the more flowing it feels, the more you like it. In fact, I'll go as far as saying that I really love it. Honestly, it's a great bit of kit. If this was my car, I'd probably put a cheeky map on it just to give it that little bit more power and give it a full exhaust, maybe in a Krapovich or something like that. This would be my ultimate daily driver, because hatch, you'll get more boot space. I would go for the Saloon. You can put 5 adults in this, no problem. It's got wireless Apple CarPlay, good build quality, great grip, perfect all-weather capability, and I reckon on a track this car would be an absolute riot. Maybe I'll have to do a separate video in the near future where we take an RS3 on track just to see what it's capable of, because it's bloody good. Honestly, I've got my new favourite Audi. It's not the RS6, it's not the R8, it's the RS3. And if you spec this with the right options at 60-odd thousand pounds, I think you've got yourself a pretty damn good car. And when you pick these up when they're 3 or 4 years old, you can get it for sub 40-odd K. Man, with a good PCP, with a decent balloon at the end of it, because the residual values are pretty strong on RS3s. I think your monthly payments, 400-500 quid a month. Yeah, I'll pay 500 quid a month for one of these. Let's drive back into town, do some everyday normal driving, what normal RS3 people do. There's also a really nice place that do some really good food that we're going to go to, have a bit of grub, and drive around town for the evening to come up with a fair conclusion. But so far on the road, it's really good. On the motorway, we'll see what it's like, and yeah, see where we go from there. So the next time you'll see me is somewhere in East London. Right, we're back in London in the RS3. We know what this car's like on a B road, so now we're going to have a nice break by having some food at Smoke and Pepper. Wow, I'm stuffed full of food. That was brilliant. I had like chips with some beef in there, like an Angus beef, and I had a couple of other chicken bits mixed in with cheese. Big shout out to Smoke and Pepper. Go check them out, especially if you're in Stoke Newington. Anyway, let's go and see what the RS3 is like around town, do RS3 kind of things, and then also come up with a conclusion to see what's what. So the reason why I'm driving this RS3 around town is because there's something cool about driving a car around London late at night. You know, no one's awake, no one's around, you can just chill and relax and see how this car behaves. But there is logic to this rather late night madness, because, well, everywhere I go, everywhere I see is RS3s. Majority of the time I see them are in London. It still feels like a really nice place to be. You know, some of the bumpy roads around East London, which, I'll be honest with you, an RS3 would just jiggle all over the place. This is just absorbing them so well. Okay, it can't deflect the odd pothole, but obviously my attitude to that is you avoid them as much as you can. But it's much nicer and easier to live with. However, I do think the gearbox at times is a little bit hesitant. I sometimes think whether the powertrain is slower in its throttle response and shifts compared to the previous car. But if you leave the drive select system in its auto mode, it does a pretty alright job. And then obviously you've got the RS button to individually configure however you want it to be. I would just run it in comfort mode for just everyday normal driving. And then obviously when you're on the right road and you want to go for max attack, switch it to your favourite RS mode, and hey presto, you've got yourself a pretty good weapon indeed. Is it worth the asking price of £70,000? I think the whole £70,000 thing is kind of clickbait, because really that's what they're going over list, which is near enough £70,000 subject to options. If you're patient enough and just wait for your RS3 to be delivered, I know there's a massive delay, etc., with everything going on, but if you're just patient, wait for it, and you aren't too greedy on the options, like small things like electric seats, I don't think you need that. Alright, B&O sound system you need, and the pan roof, but other than that, I'm not sure I'd go for carbon ceramic brakes. I mean, especially if you're doing track days. Audi say it's handy for track days. I get where they're coming from. It's fade resistant, but in the long run, it's just going to cost you an arm and a leg. And there are some really good aftermarket performance pads with braided lines that do virtually the same job. So if you're not too greedy with the options, in the near 60-ish thousand pound mark. So at that price point, yes, it is worth the money, because it actually feels quite special. What makes it feel special? Well, for starters, I love the way it looks, especially in saloon form. It just looks more premium, tough. Those flared arches give it just a nice purpose on the road. Yeah, I love the look of it. That massive grille, even though I don't like the massive grills on the BMW, I don't know, Audi seem to know how to style cars really well. But like I said, the previous letdowns of RS3s were the fact that they weren't that involving to drive. They were just one-trick ponies. It's easily the most effective and usable four-wheel drive systems, you know, out of this clever clutch pack kind of thing, that whatever you want to call it. This does feel like it's got a permanent all-wheel drive system all of the time, and you can actually feel that you're being pushed and rotated out of corners. It's a strange four-wheel drive system in the sense of you need to work within the parameters of how the car behaves. If you know what you're doing and you grab it by the scruff of the neck, sometimes it can catch you out. You don't want to be overdriving it too much. What you want to do is carry momentum into a corner, give it some throttle, and then all you can feel is the car just pivoting around you. It's a nice sensation. That paired with a dual clutch gearbox, which I think is slightly slower than before, and this 5-cylinder motor, it's a really nice package. As a package, as a whole, it's complete. I would definitely have this over a Merc A45S. The Merc is a little bit sharper, but there's just something about this RS3 that I really like. It's probably the Audi I'd have out of all of them. I include the RS6 in that. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you've enjoyed this living with an Audi RS3. And if you'd like to see more content like this, please leave a comment down below. Also like and subscribe and hit the bell notification icon if you want to see more content like this. Until next time folks, see you later.